Hello YouTube chess lovers, my friends, this is Gunjan here. Welcome to the 7th episode of my chess Raputa against e4. In this episode, we are going to see Scotch game from the black perspective. Now, as per our Raputa move order, the Scotch game arises after e4, knight to c6, d4, e5, knight to f3, pawn captures. And in the 5th and the 6th episode of my chess Raputa, I have covered some gambit ideas by white. So if you haven't checked it out, you can certainly have a look at them. But in this game, we are going to concentrate on the proper Scotch game, which arises after the move order knight captures d4. Now the same position can also be reached via different move order. So for example, if you are a e4, e5 player, then after knight to f3, knight to c6, d4, pawn captures and knight captures, we reach to the same position. Now here black has plenty of choices, but the choice I have made is very dynamic, and the most important part is it limits the white option. Here I'm proposing that black should continue with the move knight to f6. So straight away this knight is pressurizing the e4 square, and that's why white options are very much limited. Now mainly there are two moves tried by the white. One is knight captures c6 and then pushing this pawn forward, and the second one is defending this e4 pawn with the move knight to c3. In this video we are going to see knight captures c6. In my next episode I am going to concentrate on the move knight to c3. After knight captures, black should obviously capture with the b pawn. And now if knight to c3 at this point, then it will transpose to the line which we are going to see in the next episode. So there are two independent moves tried by the white over here. Now the e5 is the main move over here, but instead of e5 there is a one fashionable line right now in the Scotch game, that is bishop to d3. The idea is when black plays the obvious move d5, white is going to push with the move e5. Now instead of e5, if again white capture the pawn, then it will transpose to the line which we are going to see in the next episode. So let's see what will happen after white plays the obvious move e5. Well, here black has to play very accurately, because if you don't know the theory over here, then you can easily get into the trouble, especially in the opening. And you have to remember this move order. Black has to play knight to g4, attacking e5. The theory goes with the castle on the king side. Now you play this important move bishop to c5, so pinning the f pawn and stopping rook to e1 ideas. White continue here with the move queen to e2, defending the e5. We renew one more time with the move queen to e7, and now the only way to defend that pawn is bishop to f4. And at first sight it looks like white is doing very good, but after black's next reply, that is g5, I think white is in a huge trouble. The problem over here is bishop to g3 is not at all advisable. The simple reason is then black commences his kingside attack instantly with the move h5, and you can already see the h4 is coming, and if white try to kick this knight with the move h3, then the situation can get worse after the move h4. So after few exchange, it is only black who is in the driving seat. So it is clear that bishop to g3 is not possible. The best move suggested by engine is bishop to d2, but after that black can simply capture this pawn and remain a solid pawn advantage. No matter however white attacks, for example rook to e1, bishop to d6, bishop to c3, f6, knight to d2, and now simply castle on the king side. Okay, black has an open king, but after all he is a simple pawn up, and there is no immediate threat on the black king, so this is an advantageous position for the black. Okay, let's see the main line, which start with the move e5. Well, after that black has to obviously continue here with the move queen to e7, pinning that pawn, and the only good reply for the white over here is queen to e2. Kindly note, if white continue here with the move f4, then the simplest plan I have highlighted by the arrows over here, that is you play d6, knight to d7, and if required you can play f6 and severely pressurizing the pawn, and in some lines even black can win that pawn. So the only critical reply over here is queen to e2. Afterwards, black should continue with the move knight to d5. And this is pretty much the starting position of the main line of the Scotch. Now the main moves over here are c4 and knight to d2. But apart from that, if your opponent plays other moves, then let me highlight the plan of the campaign by the black. It is very simple and easy to remember plan for the black. So what you have to do is to play the move g6, followed by the move bishop to g7, then castle on the king side, and then start attacking the e5 weaknesses, which in many cases turns out weakest spot in the white camp. So for example, if your opponent continue here with the move such as b3 or g3, then you can certainly go ahead and follow up with this plan. And in fact, you are going to see this plan in the action with the mainline move orders. So let's see them. So first and the obvious main line I want to consider is c4, which is the highest played move by the white. Well, here black can play the move knight to b6, but I think it's a bit passive. So the move which I'm going to recommend is bishop to a6. So black is trying to complete his development based on some pin tactics. Now, as per the theory, there are 4 good moves which I have highlighted by the arrows. So let's see each by turn. The first and the obvious move you should know is queen to e4 is not a good move. The simple reason is, let's say if black wants, black can do some repetitions. But instead of that, I'm recommending that you should continue here with the move knight to b4. And it's a very tricky move to meet. For example, the most obvious response such as a3 turns out as a blunder because of the wonderful reply by black, that is d5. So queen cannot protect c2 anymore. So for example, after pawn captures, the support on the c2 has gone. And if white thinks he win a piece after queen captures, then if you closely look at it, after queen captures e5, it is white who has lost the queen. Well, you might say, well, a3 is not force. How about if white plays other moves such as, let's say, knight to c3? Well, the same problem. Here black will continue with the move rook to d8. And now a3 leads to the same problem after the move d5. Now to illustrate my point, I like to show you one of my game where my opponent continue here with the move queen to b1. Maybe he thought that I lost my knight, but actually it's not true. Here black continue with the move queen captures e5 check, and you can easily see that d pawn is running down the board with some devastation. Now the only good move over here is bishop to e2. But apart from bishop to e2, if your opponent plays moves such as knight to e2 or king to d1, then I have covered those lines in the PGN, so you can check it out. In the game, my opponent continued with the move bishop to e2 indeed. I continue with the move d4, attacking knight, and now he grabbed my knight. So he thought that, okay, white is losing 1 piece, but in return, white gained 2 pieces. But in fact, the position is more deadly than that. Here I continue with the move pawn captures, and after rook captures a6, black can play this dazzling move bishop to b4. So simple idea, c2 and nabbing the white queen. The only good reply over here is castle, which is played by my opponent. But then black regained his piece with an interest, and now black has some deadly threats on the back rank. One simple example is, let's say if your opponent plays bishop to e3, then after c2, white is completely busted. So that's not possible. In the game, he tried queen to f5. I played c2. So now I am indeed threatening rook to d1. My opponent goes for some queen trade, that is queen to f3. But then I was more than happy to do this because after queen captures, pawn captures, rook to d1, rook captures a7, and castle on the king side, white has pretty much lost position due to the wonderful pawn on the c2. The second move white can try over here is g3, which is a choice of many positional players. But here, as I have highlighted earlier, black plan of campaign is very simple. So we are going to continue here with the move g6. After bishop to g2, bishop to g7, already white has some problems on the e4 square. Now if white try to defend this pawn with the move f4, then the simplest is you continue with the move f6, attacking one more time, and now there is no way white can defend this pawn. So white has to find some other ways to create complications, and one way to do is to play queen to e4. So now that knight is hanging, but here black can simply reply with the move knight to b6, and now there are two attacks on two spots which cannot be defended. So for example, if b3, then after pawn captures, bishop to a3, and now the wonderful move d5 will simply give a winning advantage to the black. For example, if white continue here with the move bishop captures e7, then after pawn captures, bishop to b4, pawn captures f4, so there is a discover attack to the rook. Only good way to defend is bishop to c3, but after the move bishop captures, knight captures, f3, bishop to a3, and now the move e3. Black has some deadly pawns on the 6th rank, and it gives more than a decisive advantage. Well, instead of bishop to e7 in one game, my opponent continue here with the move queen to e2, but after queen to f6, knight to d2, and the move e4, black has posted a wonderful pawn chain in the center of the board. And kindly note, black can always do artificial castle with the move king to f7 and the rook to e8. Now the third and the most popular move played over here is b3. Well, against it, our plan of campaign will remain the same. This is something I like very much about this line. Can you guess black's next move? Yes, it's very obvious. g6. Planning is bishop g7 and castle, and what white can do? Well, here the main move is f4, but apart from f4, white has tried other moves such as bishop to a3 and g3. So let's look at them first. What happens if your opponent plays bishop to a3? Well, the simplest is you block that diagonal with the move d6, and at the same time attacking the e5. Here f4 is not possible, so the only way to come out from this is capturing this pawn. But then comes queen captures, bishop captures, bishop to g7, attacking the rook. So white is forced to go into this line after pawn captures knight, bishop captures bishop, king captures, bishop captures rook, pawn captures, bishop captures, and now simply castle on the queen side, where white has a knight and a 2 pawns for the rook, but in such an endgame position they are ineffective, and it is only black who is having advantage. The second sideline move white can try over here is g3. So b3 and g3 combine together, but nevertheless we are going to continue our plan, that is after g3, bishop g7, bishop to b2, and now castle on the king side, and after the move bishop to g2, we are going to target the weak e5 pawn with the move rook to e8. I have played 2 games in this line, where in the first game my opponent defended the e5 pawn with the move f4, which is always a good sign for us because we can immediately attack it with the move f6. And funny enough, in this case white cannot even take that pawn. My opponent continue here with the move queen to d2, so his idea is to attack the knight, but after pawn captures, and now the simple move pawn captures. Even though white has a piece advantage, his position is completely lost. Let me show you how. Here the first response is king to d1. Afterwards, black continue with the move f3, attacking the bishop, bishop to f1, bishop captures, rook captures, bishop captures, queen captures, and now the star move queen to e2, and black is completely winning. So to cut the long story short, white has the only good reply over here is f4. Now against f4, I'm recommending that you should hit out in the center immediately with the move d6. Kindly note, if queen moves somewhere, for example let's say queen to f2 or queen to d2, then the simplest is you move this knight from b6 to d7, where it participates to pressurize the e5 square. So that means white has to find some other good alternatives. Now the first and the bad alternative is bishop to a3, because it simply loses a pawn after knight captures f4. So that cannot be good. If white plays bishop to g2, which is a second bishop move, then black can simply continue here with the move bishop to g7. And now in order to save the pawn, white has to attack the knight, and the one tricky way white can do is queen to f3. So attacking knight and beyond c6. But here black has this dazzling reply, d captures e5, and no matter however white plays, he has a lost position. So for example, if white try to grab a piece after pawn captures, then the simplest is pawn captures with a check. And now not only that dark square bishop is gone, but rook in the corner also falls in the next move. The third move white can try over here is e captures d6. Well, this is the worst version of the last line which we have seen, because after queen captures, bishop captures, and the move bishop to g7, we have the familiar exchange forcefully happen, that is pawn captures knight, bishop captures bishop, king captures, bishop captures rook, and after pawn captures and pawn captures, this time around white has only one pawn and a knight for the rook. Last but not least, white has this tricky move queen to f3, which has a very sneaky idea that if you move the knight, then the c6 pawn drop as well as the rook in the corner. But here black has this sufficient good reply, that is knight to b4. So not only defending the c6 but attacking on c2. Now if white play passive moves such as knight to a3, then after d captures e5, black obtain a winning advantage. So the first reply is a3. But then black can continue with the move knight to c2 check, king to d1, and now not capturing the rook in the corner, but to come back and defend the c6 and the same time attacking the queen. I reached this position against a one high rated opponent where he continued with the move queen to e4, but after d captures e5, f captures e5, and castle on the queen side, white has a disgusting position. At this point, my opponent finds nothing better than knight to d2, but after knight captures b3, attacking the knight, queen to g4 check, rook to d7, e6 attacking the rook, f captures e6, rook to a2, defending the knight, but after bishop to h6, the pressure has built up so much that sooner or later black is going to win a piece and in fact the game. The fourth and the final move I can try over here is knight to d2. Well, against this our plan of campaign is very consistent. We are going to continue with the move g6. And now if your opponent plays moves such as b3 or g3, then we are obviously going to continue with the move bishop to g7 and castle on the king side with attack on e5. So the only logical reply over here is knight to f3. Idea is to play bishop to g5. Now apart from knight to f3, there is a sneaky move over here which can trap black knight, which you need to aware of it, and the move is queen to e4. Now here if you try the same stuff, which is knight to b4, then white can indeed play the move a3, and this time around d5 doesn't work. The simple reason is here the queen has a space to run to the b1 square, and now your knight is simply trapped. I once fall for this trap, and that's why I am making sure that you are not going to fall for it. So instead of knight to b4 at this point, black has a better reply, and that is f5. If queen to d4, then knight to b4 indeed will happen. So the best reply over here for the white is to capture this pawn, but then after knight captures, queen captures, bishop captures. Not only black is ahead in the development, but black has some open files to work on his attack. Okay, back to the main line, that is knight to f3. Well, before bishop g5 happens, I'm recommending over here that you should certainly harass white king via the move queen check. Kindly note, bishop to d2 is not possible due to the b2 pawn fall, so the other replies needs to be considered. The first one I want to consider is queen to d2, which is in fact a blunder, because after bishop captures c4, black has won an important pawn, and the tactical justification of this line is if queen captures, then bishop captures comes with a check, so white doesn't have time to capture our bishop. So obviously queen to d2 is not possible. That leads to the second reply, that is knight to d2. Well, after that I'm recommending that you should continue with your normal plan, that is bishop to g7. Well, the whole point is after the move a3, black will retrieve his queen back after queen to e7, and now no longer white has this bishop g5 ideas. So I'll just give you a sample line, let's say knight to f3, trying same stuff, but this time it's not going to work because after castle and bishop to g5, black has a simple reply, f6, and this will completely refute this line. So for example, after pawn captures, queen captures, bishop captures, knight captures, castle on the king side, knight to e4 attacking b2, bishop to c1, and now rook a to e1. And it is black who has all the pieces placed aggressively. Last but not least, white can play the move king to d1, but if you have to move the king just in the opening, then I seriously have doubt that white is playing for the win. Here obviously you are going to continue with the move knight to b6, and after the move b3 we can play the move bishop to g7, and black has a simple plan to castle on the king side, put this queen back on e7, and then asking a question, what this funny king doing on the d1 square. Okay, more or less we completely dealt with the c4, so now it's time to look at the other line, which is knight to d2, which I personally found not that attractive for the white. Anyways, our plan is simple. Yup, it's g6, knight to f3, same idea, and we have the same plan, that is queen to b4 check. Again, white options are very limited. For example, if c3, then knight captures c3. If bishop to d2, then queen captures b2. So that leads to the same replies which we have seen already. The first reply I want to consider is queen to d2. Well, against this I'm recommending you should continue with the move rook to b8. And now there are two replies tried over here against me. In the first game my opponent played the move c4, but after queen captures, bishop captures, knight to b4, king to d1, and now the simplest move c5 will give more than sufficient advantage to the black. The second try is a3. Well, against this I'm recommending you should exchange the queen, and after the move knight to d2 we can continue with the move bishop to g7, and after the move c4 we can play the move knight back to e7. So right now black is attacking e5. The obvious way to defend is to play f4, but then comes f6, attacking the pawn one more time, and after ef6, bishop f6, rook to b1, d5, pawn captures, and now the wonderful move bishop to f5. So those bishops are really killing white right now. White is forced to move his rook after rook to a1 and c captures d5. Black obtain a pretty good position. Now just to illustrate my point, if white continues here with the move bishop to e2, which is a natural looking move, then black can obviously capture this pawn, and after bishop captures and rook captures, not only black has posted the rook on the 7th and stopped white to castle on the king side, but black has a wonderful central pawns, and not to mention black is also a pawn up. Apart from queen to d2, if opponent plays knight to d2 or king d1, let's say knight to d2, then after bishop g7 and c4, we transpose to the line which we have already covered. Kindly note, moves such as a3 is good for black because after queen to e7, black is a tempo ahead in this situation. Same goes with the king d1 because after king to d1, bishop g7 and c4, we transpose to the line which I have already shown. That's it guys. I hope with this brief analysis you are now confident enough to match the Scotch game, especially against the move knight capture c6. The plan I have recommended throughout the game is very consistent, so in the most of the cases you are going to go g6, bishop g7, castle on the king side, and there is a typical idea to attack on the e5, and it is not surprising that in many lines black get a tremendous advantageous position. Well, thank you for watching this video. Feel free to like, subscribe and comment on my video, and I'll meet you in my next episode, knight to c3 variation, very soon. Bye and take care. So straight away let me enter to the main line which occurs when white plays the move c3, and now here I recommend that you should play the move knight to f6. Instead of that, I'm recommending a line which will not only equalize black early in the opening stage, but it is the black who is having all the fun. The move I'm proposing is d5. So counter attacking in the